Despite only having 22% of the ball, they beat beat Brighton, who were, of course, perfect going into this clash by 3-1. Happy hammers, Shaq.
Yeah, and it's exactly what I think this West Ham side is built to do. Sit back, defend. Brighton defensively could not cope with Michael Antonio and his strength and the running of Ward-Prowse and Bowen from midfield. And the truth is, despite the lack of possession, up until the closing maybe 10 minutes, Areola didn't have an awful lot to do. I thought West Ham defended really well and played to their strengths. And then at 3-0, the game just felt won. David Moyes decides to make changes, understandably pulls Michael Antonio off, just to give him a little bit of a rest. And then West Ham just couldn't hold the ball up. And that's when you saw Brighton at their best. They got one back. And I have to say, at that point, Areola makes 2 incredible saves in the closing 10 minutes. And we could be having a much different discussion about West Ham and this game in general. But Brighton, for as good as they were last season, I was a little bit disappointed in them during the course of this 90 minutes. Couldn't cope with what I thought was a predictable West Ham approach. And honestly, weren't creative enough in making opportunities to claw themselves back in earlier.
I think we see this from Brighton. Every now and again, they sort of... And I can't off the top of my head remember, but I think there was the odd one last year where, just out the blue, they got... in fact, was it Liverpool? I can't remember who it was. Somebody gave them a bit of a gubbins last year at home, and you were like, wow. Might have been Everton. Everton went there and beat them by, was it 4 or 5? And you were like, holy smokes, where'd this come from? They just left themselves so open to the counter-attack at home. And it happens now and again, and I think that was another case today. The way they've started this season has been brilliant up until today, and what we saw again today was lots of possession, but getting caught with the power of Michael Antonio and getting caught with the counter-attack. But that's not the first time this has happened to Brighton. It won't be the last. Can I just slightly backtrack on the Tottenham scenario?
No, we finished
because
that conversation's done.
Well, I think it's important because they've played the game, played 3 games basically with 10 men. You know, everybody's talking about Harry Kane leaving and who's going to replace him. Well, they've replaced him with nobody because they might as well play a young kid if they have a young kid who's ready up front, rather than the big mouth Brazilian. Because you know, I've mentioned this before. He harped on, he chipped on, and he talked on about the chances and the lack of them and this and what he can bring. What he is what he was at Everton, was a battering ram for a team that didn't have much possession. They launch it forward, he'd go and fight, he'd get the odd goal, he'd get a few bookings, he'd ruffle up a few defenders. Well, do you know what? At Tottenham, he was a bench player until Harry Kane left. Now he's a player in a side that has a little bit more finesse, and he's a passenger. An absolute passenger. So you like my phrase, elephant in the room. He is the elephant in the room. It's Kai Havertz at Arsenal and it's Richarlison at Tottenham. And Ange Postecoglou is going to have to do something about it because that can't continue.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.